Well, welcome to Inspired Living in Puerto Vallarta. I'm Barbara LaPointe, your realtor with a heart and your host. Today, my guest is Lesle Hayden. Lesle holds a PhD in performance psychology and she is an NLP master. And she combines a unique background in performance psychology and journalism and communications to develop resourceful and resilient strategic action plans that really launch her clients forward. This is a very super valuable podcast today, I think, for our audience out there, because we will be talking about relocation transition coaching. And Lesle is the person. So if you're thinking about reestablishing and rebuilding a new life in a new country, and whether you're moving to a new city or a new country or any new location, relocations can be stressful. They're daunting and they're always surprising. So Lesle's cross-cultural coaching offers strong support and innovative coping strategies during the tough times of change and often uncertainty. Her personal experience of multiple moves across borders. Growing up, she actually attended 23 schools across 65 countries, will assist you and your family to successfully transition, integrate, and thrive in your new home country, in your new paradise. And today, I'd like to welcome you, Lesle. Hello.
Hi, Bob. I just need to correct you. That's not a PhD. I'm not a doctor. I'm a PGD. So that's just it's a graduate diploma, graduate degree, but not a doctor. So I don't want to mislead anyone in thinking that I am a doctor. But I definitely have this very, very strong background and training experience in performance psychology. So I just wanted to correct that. But hi, I'm delighted to be here. And you're right. If anyone has any relocation experience and expertise, it's me. I have lived right across 65 countries, and I did go to 23 schools. So I know what it's like to relocate and what it means to reinvent. And so I'm really interested today to talk to your audience, because I think a lot of people, when they talk about relocation and when they read about it, they're reading about the cost of living and they're reading about possibly the climate and, how much rent is, but very little attention is actually paid to the psychological and the emotional challenges and benefits of relocating. So that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Yes, the psychological impacts, because honestly, moving to a new country takes courage, but it's also very overwhelming, Lesle. So I thought I'd begin by asking you, what are the emotional stages that one goes through when they move to a new country?
Okay, that's a great question, Barbara, because interesting enough, there are actually 5 distinct stages that psychologists have identified when you move through. And what's interesting about stages is that, we're never linear. So it doesn't mean you necessarily move from one stage to the next stage to the next stage. You ebb and flow. So you might get stuck a little while in one stage and then actually go back to a former stage and then come back again. So I want people to keep that in mind when they're listening. But let's go through the 5 stages. So the first one is that pre-departure stage, right? And that's when you're all excited about leaving. You've got great anticipation. You make big plans about things that you're going to do. You've got a lot of social support at this time, because everybody, particularly if you're moving to a place like Puerto Vallarta or some place that is a dream location, everybody's envious and everybody's, looking and thinking, geez, I'd love to move there too. So lots of good feelings about that, right? Lots of excitement. With that, though, comes a sense of sadness and loss, because you're leaving things behind. You're leaving familiar, you're leaving friends and family, you're leaving things that mean things to you, things that you have built up in that comfort stage. So as we look forward and we're excited, we're also feeling that grief and anxiety about that. So that's the first stage. That's pre-departure. Then we arrive. And just like when you're just brand newly married, you're in a honeymoon stage. Everything when you arrive is exciting. And it's your anticipation about things. You're enthusiastic, you're excited, you're making all these plans. It's all a time of I'm going to do this. I plans to do this. I get a lot of like new life plans, new things that are happening. And I get a lot of clients happening at this stage because this stage actually allows you to recreate and sort of shape the life that you've decided you want to live. So I know, for instance, when I moved each time to those 23 schools, that gave me an opportunity to be a different person. And this is what happens when you move to a new place. You get a chance to say, I don't want to bring some of that baggage behind. I'm going to come out and this is who I want to be and this is the way I want to live my life here. You get that opportunity to make that choice. So when you work with a coach, this is a really good time because you actually get to say, well, what do I care about? What are my values in life? And how do I want to shape that life? And a coach will help you to do that. So that's a good stage, the honeymoon stage. But coming up next is the culture shock. And it doesn't matter how much you love where you are. It doesn't matter how charming the place may be. When we've been here for a little while, we begin to recognize that we're unsettled. We just don't feel as comfortable. Everything is new. You're having to navigate things. You're having to figure out things. You don't even know where to go to figure them out. And particularly if you're living in a place that has language barriers or government regulations, that's really hard to navigate. So that culture shock is a time of false expectations. It's feelings of disorientation, frustration, confusion, and anxiety. And that's very, very normal for you to feel that during this stage. You know, we always should feel we're happy to be here, but the fact is it's very, very, as you said, very, very difficult when you move to a new place.
Yes. Let's see, I actually found that doing easy things, simple things like, for instance, going to a bank machine was really hard for me. And I've noticed that with other people, like doing simple transactions that we've done our entire life sometimes become intimidating and difficult. And now, many months later, we're doing them and we wonder, why couldn't I do them in my first 3 months in this new country? So weird.
It's so strange. You know, you don't see things the same way. When my husband and I first moved here, we had a girlfriend who was coming out a few weeks later, and there were so many things we couldn't find, and we made her bring a whole separate suitcase full of things that we absolutely needed that we couldn't find. And of course, a month later, we keep saying, oh, look, here it is, here it is, here it is. So
Yeah.
you don't see things the same way, but you're in a state of confusion. You feel less confident, and everything's new. And anytime you're in a time of change and uncertainty, it's very difficult to navigate that. And it's very tiring. During that time of culture shock, you're overwhelmingly tired all the time because you're also, every decision you make. In reality, we make about 35,000 decisions every day in our normal life. But when you move to a new location, you almost double that number because you have to figure out everything anew. Even just getting your coffee, where to get your coffee, where to go for a dentist, rather than just going to the dentist. So it's not even, should I go to the dentist? It's, how do I go to the dentist? Who should I go see? Do I risk it? How am I going to be able to communicate? Who should I ask? So every decision that we make during this time is doubled. And that's why it's very tiring and very stressful. Again, good time to work with a coach because these are all feelings that you will move through. Just as you said, Barbara, you become much more fluent in living in the life that you've chosen. And we just need to help you to get through these things so you get unstuck. You don't get stuck during these periods. So that's the third shock. So the third stage. So we've had the pre-departure, which is exciting. We've had the honeymoon stage. Then we have the culture shock. And then we move into the stage of adjustment. And this is when you really start to adjust to a new life. And this typically occurs 6 to 12 months after you've moved to a new place. And you're developing new routines. The concept of new routines is so critical to us as humans. We all are very routine-based. And when we have routines, that makes us feel very comfortable. And when we talked about those decision makings, it reduces the decisions because that's your routine. You don't have to think about that. And therefore, it's much easier, much less tiring. So during that period of adjustment, when we start to create these routines, we start to meet people, we start to feel more confident, more comfortable, things come together more easily for you. about 6 to 12 months. And then finally, you're into the period of integration. And this takes about 2 years. They say it takes about 2 years of the move until you really feel you're comfortable. You're where you're at. During earlier times, you may have questioned whether or not this was actually the right decision to be made. Like, should you have come here? And you re-question everything. During that period of integration, you've kind of laid it all. You're feeling comfortable, and this has become home. And that's a really nice place to be. And it's interesting that it's 2 years to integrate because it used to be 6 years. But because of the fact now that we have such great technology available to us, not only Google Translation, but the ability to resource and things like Facebook groups and meetup groups and places that you can reach out to, these expat groups that you can reach out to ask them those questions, that's kind of hastened our ability to feel more comfortable. So kind of interesting, those 5 stages.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. And there's more people from America and Canada moving to Mexico, although this information is valuable to anyone moving anywhere all over the world. But there's a lot of movement and a lot of people moving to Mexico. So it's really fascinating, very valuable. Now, when people move to a different country, and in this instance to Mexico, there's some specific challenges that people often experience when they relocate. Is that correct, Leslie?
Absolutely. So what's interesting is when you move abroad, that feeds into the fantasy that most of us have. And that's the fantasy of escaping, right? Whether you escaped climate, as my husband and I did, because we hated, after living for 16 years in Sydney, Australia, we hated the Canadian winter. So that was our big escape. And other people escape other things. They may just feel that they don't connect anymore in their community. They might be looking for new jobs, new career opportunities. They might be escaping a marriage that doesn't work for them anymore. And so after a divorce, they move to a new location. But there is a sense of breaking free when we move. And that's really exciting. But like all change, that also comes with its own set of challenges. So the first thing that we encounter really when we move is that sense of homesick, being homesick. Everybody at some point feels homesick. And homesick really just means missing the familiar, being comfortable with the familiar. As much as you may love living here, everything is new, right? And so grocery stores, you go in, you don't know the aisles yet. You don't know the type of foods, and the packaging is different. And sometimes you just sort of wish you were back in your own town, back in your own grocery store. Little things like that, actually. What we find is at the beginning, when people first move, they spend a lot of time on the internet. They spend a lot of time checking in and reconnecting with people. And that's a really good thing to do. I mean, I really want to tell you that the more you connect with those back home, the better it is, because you feel that sense of yourself. You don't feel so alone and alienated. But everybody feels homesick. And that's normal. And you'll go through periods, particularly during special anniversaries or special occasions or holidays. We all feel that that sense of loss and miss. So that's a key thing. The next thing is there is a psychological concept called place of attachment. And that's the feeling of belonging and rootedness where you live. And it takes a while for us to develop that attachment to a place, but it's something that we as humans feel very strongly about. So that's another reason why at the beginning you just feel a little bit out of a loss, a little bit like a cork floating in the ocean. Stress, anxiety, and depression play a very, very big part in a move. It's, again, that uncertainty and that unpredictability of your new environment. And we've all experienced that. So if anybody is feeling unstuck or anxious or depressed, just know that these are feelings that will pass. The more you become familiar with an environment, the less you'll feel down, the more you'll feel up and more excited. So these feelings will pass, but it does help to work with someone to help you get unstuck, to sort of look at where some of those challenges, some of those obstacles might be for you, and then move you much quicker through the process. It's only a temporary feeling, though. Another key thing is identity issues, because when we talked about moving to the 23 schools, for instance, every time I moved, as I said, I was a new person and I got to reinvent myself. a lot of people, when they move to a new environment, coming to Mexico, you don't have to be the person that you were before. You may choose to be somebody else. You may choose to present yourself as a more outgoing person. A lot of people choose at that time to come out. That's a big thing because they're saying, I'm now going to live the way I want to live. So identifying who you are, how you want to live, and then living that is a challenge, a great opportunity, but it does come with stress and anxiety because you're remaking yourself, you're reintroducing yourself to yourself. So that's an interesting point. And then language barriers. Here in Mexico, people think, oh, well, it's just if I can just learn Spanish, right? Or many people say, I don't even need to learn Spanish because you can communicate in English. But language is not just about the words that you speak. Language is about your personality and how you communicate. The humorist David Sedaris said when he moved to France, for instance, he totally lost his humor and his wit. He lost his personality. And that can happen in a different language.
That's absolutely fascinating to me. Everything you're saying is really resonating. I was laughing when you said that you can experience anxiety, stress, and depression, because I remember, questioning, like, why would you want to invite in anxiety, stress, and depression? But it's really relieving to hear that these feelings are normal and that we can move through them.
Whenever you go through major change, you do experience the highs and the lows. We always have the shadows with the sunshine. And people who move to Mexico must remember that. We're here in the sunshine, but there are shadows. And when it comes right down to it, we're just human. We are still going to experience all these things, even though we're in a different environment. But back to the language, what I want people to remember is that the spoken word is only 77% of how we communicate. And that body language is so much more. So that's 55% is your actual body language, and 38%. So wait a minute, that would be 33%. Oh, no, 58, 33, 7. 38% is your tone of voice. So when you are communicating here, if you don't speak the language, as many of us don't, and you're learning it, as many of us are, myself included, thank you, Duolingo. If you can remember that the way in which you present is so critical, even though you don't have the words, right? So doing a lot of charades, being very playful with it will really help you to get your point across. And an
Wow.
interesting, sorry?
Sorry, go ahead, Leslie.
The last point I want to make, and I think everybody will really relate to this, is when you move to a beautiful place like Mexico, we feel we can't complain. We feel, as we talked about, that everybody looks to us and thinks we're living in this beautiful paradise. And how can we ever feel down? And how can we ever feel unhappy? And we can't complain about anything because we're so lucky to be here. And when we look around at other people in the community, we still very fortunate because we're living in beautiful locations and beautiful condos. But as I've said, we are all human and we can't feel guilty for how we feel. It's very normal. Being that new kid all the time, being an explorer, having to figure things out all the time, it's hard. And although maybe we can't complain to those back home, it's important to have a support system here and to find others that you can sit and complain with, just because it makes you feel that sense of belonging and understanding and support.
Yes, a good point. We all need a sense of belonging to just feel, connected and plug into a community. I like that. Everything you're saying is checking all the boxes for me. I felt all these things and it's so fascinating. And like I said, more people are coming to Mexico in record numbers. So I think this message is so valuable. I know, Leslie, that you're coming back on and we're going to do a specific episode dedicated to retirement and those that are coming here to Mexico to retire. But I wanted to quickly touch on challenges that might be very specific to senior citizens in particular.
There are a number of them. We talked about a number of ones that they would go through. And, when we talk about loneliness and sense of identity and loss of the familiar, that's very, very prominent amongst people who have retired because they've been living a life for a certain amount of time and now everything is new. And so they really do have to remake themselves. There isn't that comfort of being with people who know them and who understand them, and they can just sort of be themselves. They have to put themselves out that much more. So that's a big challenge for people. But I want to say that there are unbelievable benefits for people who are retired, and they go way beyond just a less expensive cup of coffee or, less paying for rent or services here. And they really touch on the emotional benefits. They touch on mental challenges. A couple of things. First of all, moving to a new place, it keeps you younger. It keeps you sharper. You do have to make all these decisions. You do have to look and explore. There's a sense of adventure to that. And you also feel a tremendous sense of accomplishment and a sense of triumph for being able to accomplish all that. You did it. At the end of the day, it was a challenging thing to go to the grocery store, but you did it and you got your groceries. And as you said, Barbara, you did it. You went to the bank, you took out money. And we don't, as retired people,
So true.
I won't say because I'm not at that stage yet, but retired people don't often have those opportunities to really get that sense of achievement anymore. We've taken ourselves out of the workforce in many cases. And where can they really see that they succeed? Where are their major successes? And so moving to a new country gives you one major success after another. It really ticks the boxes. That helps with brain development. That helps to stave off that sense of cognitive dissonance and cognitive decline, because you're constantly looking and you're constantly figuring things out. And, life is a big puzzle. We talk about doing puzzles in order to keep your brain sharp. Well, when you move to a new country, it's all a puzzle. Everything's a puzzle.
Yes, I like that. It is definitely a daily puzzle. It's a fun puzzle. So what I hear you saying is moving to a new country can reset you, and having listened to everything that you just shared and taking it all into consideration, I have to imagine that we're actually developing new neural pathways in our brain when we move.
Absolutely. I think for myself, moving to all these different countries means that I have developed so many skills that I use in everyday life. And I tell people, you're developing the skills. You're developing personal growth because it's self-discovery. It's character building. You're expanding your knowledge so much all the time. You're broadening your perspectives, right? There's excellent for brain development. That's a key thing. You've got much greater self-confidence. And when you've got greater self-confidence, because you are navigating all this, that boosts your self-esteem. And when you have higher self-esteem, that's so critical for well-being. So that's another key thing that's important. We expand our social circle. I mean, you are probably coming across people that you would never normally meet, types of people you wouldn't meet, whether it's personal or professional. It also gives you a chance to tell all your stories to a whole new audience, and it gives you a chance to hear other stories that you wouldn't have heard in your normal closed community. So you expanded there. You're really putting yourself out there. And more than anything else, you're building resilience. You're building resourcefulness. You're building adaptability, that sense of independence, which when we talk about retired people is so strong. They actually feel so much more independent and competent and confident because look what they've done. Look at the hurdles that they've jumped over. And so it's a really, really empowering thing to do. You grow, you thrive, and you boost your well-being.
Those are amazing benefits. Amazing benefits: resiliency, adaptability, expansion of your brain, new neural pathways, more empowerment. So it can actually be pretty fun too. But Leslie, I know there's some things that you should try to avoid consciously when you move to a new place.
Absolutely. I got my sort of 5 key tips to avoid. And the first thing is, it's really important not to isolate yourself. We tend to you move to a new place, it's scary, you don't know, you're unsure, and so people hunker down. Don't do that, because that will just delay the whole process. Get out there right from the start. Make a deal with yourself that you're going to go out every day. You have to do a lot of talking to yourself when you move to a new place, because you're your best friend ultimately. And also you understand yourself the best, right? So you say, this is what I'm going to do. You make deals, go out there and expand and discover. Even if you're walking down the streets, you're meeting people for coffee, if you're doing meetups, don't isolate yourself. Don't compare your home country to where you're living now, because that will just make the adjustment harder. As we talked about, you see things that you may not have seen before, and you then say, oh, like, well, when I mentioned about certain things that when we moved, we didn't see all the things. So when you're comparing today and where you are today with the past, you tend to put the past in your former country up on a pedestal, the way you do with a former relationship often. And it has all the brightness, and yours lacks that. And it's not a realistic view. It's a different filter. So try not to do that. Try not to compare everything to your home country. And don't assume that things are going to be the same as your home country, because they're not. That's why we moved. We're living and open to a whole new environment. So be open and be curious. And most important, do not neglect both your physical and your mental health. It's really, really important for you to stay healthy. Do the things that keep you healthy. And that's both physically, go out, exercise, walk, be outside in the outdoors, and mentally, check in with family. If you need to check into family, if you'd like to check in with family, that makes you feel good, check into family, but also create new environments and expand those social circles. And a study found that people who had recently moved actually spent less time doing leisure activities and more time on the computer. And so I want to caution you against that. Do not spend all your time on the computer. You're living in this beautiful environment. Get out there. Those are the key things that I think people really need to follow.
This is such powerful and relevant counseling advice that you're giving us. Wow, I'm guilty of just hunkering down on the computer, Lesle. So this is so good. And I love that you invited people to prioritize their mental health and their self-care when they're going through this massive transition.
It's a huge thing. And I don't think, as I said, when we read all the articles and we read all about, how you measure life when you move, very little attention is given to the mental aspect of it, the emotional aspect of it. And those of us who go through it that are often surprised and shocked at ourselves. We think we should have adapted so much faster, or we should be so much happier, or why is it so difficult, and why do I feel depressed or anxious? And of course you do. It's a huge, huge, huge change. Everything has changed. And so, another really important tip is don't be so hard on yourself. Give yourself a break.
Love it. So lots of self-love, lots of self-care.
Exactly. Self-love, self-care, a little bit of self-indulgence, right? When you feel you've had a tough day, indulge yourself. Do whatever it is that makes you feel comfortable and makes you feel warmer and connected. Because the more you do that, the happier you'll end up being. So it's important to stay in that positive frame of mind, but also recognize that we're not always happy and we're not always feeling positive, and just accept it. Life ebbs and flows. And as I said, we accept the shadows with the sunshine.
Yes, you're right. What did my mother used to say? She used to say peaks and valleys, peaks and valleys. So I also wanted to just quickly ask you, Lesle, if you are in a valley and you are struggling and you're not being too playful and you're not having so much fun, and how can a coach really make the difference? Someone like you with respect to this transition.
It's a really, really good question, because people say, like, how do I do it? And then there's also a bit of sense of anxiousness of, should I be talking to someone who doesn't know me? And how can they possibly help me? And I think some of the key things that come up is, the first thing is that I deal a lot with clarity. A lot of people, when they come to me, they don't quite know. They're stuck, and they don't really understand why they're stuck. They don't know what they want. I mean, it was great that they moved here, and that achieved a major objective, a major goal. And then they're saying, but what now? There's that sense of, well, what now? What happens now? How do I act now? How do I be now? A coach is somebody who helps clarify that for you. and can listen and support you. And most importantly, in a non-judgmental way without an agenda. So many people want to help, but they're coming from their own perspective. And that's not necessarily adaptable to you. It's not necessarily going to help you. So what a coach does is a coach works with how can we get you to the place that you would like to be? And that's always what it is. My type of psychology is performance psychology, motivational psychology. So we don't spend a lot of time analyzing your past. That's not what we want to spend time. We want to move you quickly forward. And instead, we look on how are you feeling and what are doable, copable strategies that we can help you to move through in order to get you to where do you want to be. And clients always have epiphanies with me. It's always a sense of, I didn't know that about myself. It might be strengths that you didn't know you had, or other elements that you hadn't identified. And that opens up. There's always this sense of growth and opening and big sense of relief that however they're feeling is okay, but it's not permanent. And we're going to move them to a place that they want to be where they're going to be happier very quickly. It's a very quick process.
Oh, no. That's very hopeful that to know that you can get the resources and the support and that you can make changes and get unstuck quite quickly with coaching. I think that's an amazing service. I know a lot of people are going to be reaching out to you for some coaching, Lesle.
Well, I hope anyone who's here in Puerto Vallarta or elsewhere, because of course we do it all, we can do it remotely, or I am in Puerto Vallarta, so we can do it face to face. But I have clients all around the world, and as far as Singapore and still Australia, and I actually have one in China, so all over, everywhere. And the idea is really, how can we work with you? What's going to be best for you? An interesting thing is when I lived in Australia, I coached Olympic athletes because Olympic athletes always go train in Australia because we have summer all year round, right? And so you get volleyball, professional volleyball athletes and beach volleyball, and so many of them who come there, swimmers. One of the things that we had to know immediately when you coached an Olympic athlete is where their focus was. Was their focus towards winning, towards looking ahead, or was their focus towards not losing, looking back? And if it was about not losing, we had to shift that, because not losing and that fear of losing, if that's your motivation, then you're going to lose seconds. And during the Olympics, it's all about the seconds. You're going to be looking back. You have to be looking forward. So we had to shift the mindset. And very often when I work with clients around relocation, that's exactly what we need to do. We need to shift the mindset to their new life, to the new way they want to be, the new way they want to feel, without spending so much time looking back to what they were. And in many cases, when you have trailing spouses or kids, I deal a lot with kids as well. There's something called the expat child syndrome. And that's for kids who are moved around a lot. And that gives them tremendous sense of loss of confidence and low self-esteem and uncertainty. And we then, too, have to direct their mindset and their thinking and their focus towards the future, towards what they want to be and where they want to go and what they can do, all of that potential. And that makes a big difference in the coaching.
Yeah, I think that I'm glad we touched on that, because oftentimes folks are coming here to retire, but there's a whole other set of group of people that are coming here to do something important to them. Start a new career, start a new practice, be a digital nomad, for example. And there's very important things that they want to accomplish in their new chapter, in this case, Mexico.
Exactly. When I moved to Sydney, for instance, I did some really exciting things. I taught at the university. I had a radio show, a coaching radio call-in show. I actually was sent to Tahiti to write a book about Tahiti. These are all things that I would never, ever have gotten the opportunity to do had I stayed in my home country at the time, Canada. And so when you move to a new country, whether you're retired, it doesn't matter what age you are, whether you're retired, whether you're new, whether you're in a new job, you're looking for a new career, there is an opportunity there for you. And when we're at home, we don't actually go out of our circle that much, right? We stay inside, we're much more intimidated. When you're in a new country, what can you do? People don't know you. You've got to put yourself out there. And so you do. The sense of intimidation, you have to deal with it and you have to make those efforts. And you end up doing so much more than you ever thought you could do, which I'm sure, Barbara, is something you've experienced, is you've got this great podcast going.
Yes, yeah, it's fantastic. You're right. Thank you, Leslie. And it is wonderful. I'm having an entirely expanded new set of conversations around new people and around new topics, but still around the human experience, because we're just all going through this human experience together, no matter what we're talking about. So it's cool. Very, very honored.
It's excellent. And, as I said, you'll find yourself meeting people that you would normally not meet. I met someone around our pool the other day who's leading me to an opportunity that I would never have even contemplated. And these things happen. If you're just open to it, if you're curious, if you let things flow when you're here. And I think that's a key thing to remember is we're here, we just want things to flow and be open to that and flow with it. You'll have all sorts of interesting adventures and opportunities. And, who knows where it will lead you. And that's very exciting.
That's so beautiful. Yes, beautiful to imagine that you can get into a flow. And there's lots of flow in Mexico. So I think that is such a beautiful, beautiful way to sort of conclude our very resourceful conversation today, Leslie. I'm very honored to have you on this podcast. You've been an amazing guest with a fantastic offering. I cannot wait till you're coming back on very soon to talk about retirement specifically.
Yeah, for those that are retired, there is hope. Really, we're going to give you a whole different perspective around retirement. So make sure you tune in for that. And for those that are relocating, be open. Be open, go out, explore. This is fun, and you can make it whatever you want to make it. So remember, you're in control. Although sometimes when we relocate, we feel out of control, but you've still got your strengths. You've got who you are, and you're going to triumph over this. So it's it's challenging, but a very exciting times. And I wish you all the best. And where could be better than here in Mexico? I mean, what could be better? So,
from Mexico. Exactly. We're going out next week for margaritas, and we're going to work on your next podcast. And so today, if someone wanted to reach you right now to have coaching with you or to receive support from you, Leslie, what is the best way for an audience member to connect with you?
Well, my website is www.C3 Strategies. So it's the letter C, the number 3, strategies, STRATEGIES.com, C3strategies.com. Sorry, I blanked for a moment on how do you spell strategies. So look at that. And my website, my email is Leslie, Leslie. My mom had 5 girls. She wanted all boys, so we all have boys' names. So that Leslie, Leslie, the boys' way, at C3 Strategies. The letter C, the number 3, strategies.com. And you know what, Barbara, I've really enjoyed this. And so anyone who connects me and said that they have heard of me through Barbara, and that's how they knew me, I'll give them a special Barbara package.
I love that. Yay! Thank you so much, Leslie.
Yeah, I really want to encourage your listeners, if you're at all stuck or if you're just ready to take more control and be in a time to really shape the life that you want to live, then contact me and let's work together on this. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you. And those contacts will be in the show notes, and all of Leslie's information will be in the show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, I invite you to like and subscribe, make comments. Leslie and I will be monitoring the comments, and we will respond to every comment that we receive on our YouTube channel right away. So Leslie and I are both here for you. And if you need a real estate agent, of course, I am your realtor with heart. So thanks for tuning in today, and be well. Until next time, I'm Barbara Lapointe.